So in this first portion, we are going to be doing an overview of how things kind of map out in our systems from a where does the site exist point of view. You're going to hear dropped quite often environment and instance. And when we're talking about environment, we're talking about the server environment where the sites are hosted. We have quite a few that we place customers into. They include the preview environment, which is a specialized environment that we'll dive a little bit further into in just a sec. We have EU production, US East, US West. US Central is our newest environment. It hasn't really gotten strong adoption quite yet, but again, it's brand new, as in it's not even had its first birthday. We have India production and we have Australia production. Now, when a client reaches out and says, hey, I'm going to buy your service, how do we figure out where to place the client? Geography, just plain and simple. We try to make sure that they are mapped geographically to the closest environment physically to where the bulk of their user base is going to exist. So if it's going to be in North America, it's going to be in US West. If it is in Europe, well, Europe has its own dedicated, so it's going to be there. We are in the US moving towards transitioning into Google Cloud for all of the US instances. That has not yet been completed. So we are in the US doing US West. US East has been retired. The US East environment is our original environment back when we only used one globally. It is our most populated environment, I'm sure you can imagine. And it has some of our largest clients in the hundreds of thousands of users. So we're not going to build you in US East unless there is a critical reason to. Okay, so what is an instance? An instance is the site. It is spark.edcast.com. It is hpa.edcast.com. Both of those are instances of the TXP. Now, not included on this slide, but I do want to make sure everyone is aware of this. You may hear instances referred to as teams. This is a callback to the original launch of Edcast. Back when it was a free for registration service on the web, you could sign up for your own team or your own instance of Edcast for free. And then you could do whatever you want with it. We haven't scrubbed the term completely out of our vocabulary or our applications. When you go to log into the Edcast app, it asks you for your team name, which in the case of Spark is spark.edcast.com. That would be the team name. When you get your instances, it's going to, I believe we went with your first initial last name, just like emails, to keep it simple. That's going to be your team name for your personal instance once it is spun up. Types of instances. Production is something I'm sure everyone is used to hearing. It is the live environment where you're doing business and stuff. Sandbox, another term I'm sure everyone is used to. Here's the kicker. Sandbox and production are technically exactly the same thing. We build them in the same environment. It is a production site. We do it intentionally this way so that as you're using Sandbox for testing, for mocking up changes to the instance, you're using the same base code as the production instance. But it isn't like the typical Sandbox where they're connected at the hip and the ear and everything is a parallel. We aren't quite there yet. We are working on copy down functionality so that Sandboxes can be in step with production. As of right now, if you're building in Sandbox and you're intending to put that into production, you're building in one place and then you're going to rebuild it in the other place, and you just kind of use two monitors, have both sites up so that you're copying settings over manually. I know it's not exactly the most elegant solution, but we have not had the chance to get copy down fully built. I am monitoring it closely. I'm sure that everyone can imagine we want copy down because then we can create template sites and use those as jumping points based on industry and such. So in the future, just not quite there. So what is preview? Preview kind of fits between QA and production. After we've gone through QA environment, we've made sure that this new feature or change isn't going to blow us up like Ashton Kutcher did. We move it into preview, and it's going to sit there for a couple of weeks. We do use it as kind of a last chance sanity test for QA purposes. But we also sell access to preview. It is its own additional instance that a customer can purchase. So the typical full-blown purchase includes a production instance, a sandbox instance, and a preview instance. So why would you want to have sandbox and preview? Well, sandbox is intended for play in production. Preview is running on the next version of Edcast. And because of the differentiation in versioning, you can't use Sandbox for testing production features at that point, because the version of the feature you're working with in Sandbox isn't yet available. So with preview, a really critical thing to note is that with preview, there's an off step. And we're going to see this much better when we get into the release schedule in just a little bit. But do understand, preview has 2 releases for every 1 production release. And that's because every 1 production release includes 2 sprints of work.
So for a customer instance, like for example, acme.com, the instance is acme.com. Can they have separate sub-instances for each division, which may have a separate look and feel, configurations, etc.?
This is a really, really great question, because we actually just ran into this exact scenario last year. I'm not sure if I can drop names, so I'm going to avoid that. But one of our biggest clients, they had a division come to us, their sales division, and say, hey, we love the service. We love it so much, but we don't want to use it the same way that the main account is using it. So what do we do? Well, we worked very closely with them to figure out some solutions, because one potential solution is we build a group. And using the micro-org combination of features that we're going to dive much more into later, we could mimic unique experiences. So if you log in as a sales user, you have your own list of channels, your own content integrations, areas of the site that are exclusively available to you as a member of sales. We could even then differentiate further so that the main site has access to some things that the sales group doesn't. That wasn't really going to fly for them, because some of the uniqueness they were looking for would be a site-wide configuration change impacting all users. So then it was the question of, can we build a sub-instance? And technically we can't. Technically, the most we could do is build them a separate instance. And then we do have a set of, I don't want to call them beta, but they aren't highly adopted features that do allow for connection between 2 instances in the same environment. Things like channels. Any machine-curated content that goes through the channel could then be fed into a parallel channel in the child site. It's not a child site because we don't construct our systems that way, but child. This isn't a highly adopted feature. I've never managed it myself. So if that is something that you need to tackle, we're probably going to pull in one of the more technical team members, either an implementation manager that has managed this sort of a deployment, like the person that was leading the charge on the account I'm talking about, or we might pull in somebody like Daniel Olin from our technical account management team, just because they have more of the technical side knowledge than I do. Okay, but great question. And I'm hoping that in the future I can share Actually, I'm just going to share it right now. You've got me going down a rabbit hole. The situation that I exampled with, we actually had a bit of a snafu. And that is, for those features I was talking about to work, the sites have to be built in the same two environments. But the main account, they're one of our oldest clients. They were built in US East. When we submitted the request for the new instance, there was some miscommunication, and we were telling them that we needed to bypass process and guidelines for this specific situation. And the person that was managing the spin up was falling back on the fact that we don't spin up instances in US East. He didn't fully understand the impact of spinning it up in US West. And we didn't realize the error until months of work had already happened. So this is going to be another point. It's going to be in a future slide, but we cannot duplicate configurations between instances. Once the instance is built, it is its own space. Until copy down exists, there is no way for us to mirror. And we can't move instances between environments. So what did we do? We literally rebuilt their entire site from ground up, including rebuilding all of their user-generated content by hand. Another side note, you cannot change the name of an instance once it is submitted. Now, I'm just going to say that is the rule. Now, if we do get painted into a corner, there is some break glass in case of emergency, all hands on decks maneuvers we can pull. But we're talking like the deal is literally going to walk away if there isn't any other option. Otherwise, we're not going to change name. We can't move it to a new environment. So when you submit that request for an instance, be crystal clear where and what the name is. And that is something we are going to cover at the end of the series, because I don't need you guys worrying about information like that quite yet. I need you to learn about building the site. Copying and configuring data, we've actually already done this. No copy between instances. So if you are building a brand new channel in Sandbox, and you're building it there so that you can demo it to managers or whoever it may be, you're going to be rebuilding that channel entirely in the production site by hand.